Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another video. If you're someone out there who's been looking for land, maybe you want to start a family compound, maybe you want to start a farmstead, maybe you're looking for some hunting land, then this is going to be the video for you because we're going to be talking all things land. I get asked all the time about land, so I figured I would finally do a video about it. So we're going to dive right in. And the first thing that I have on my list here, understand what you're getting yourself into when it comes to whatever your dream is, right? And the reason I say this is because it's not uncommon to see land out there where someone has kind of started the dream but had to bail for one reason or another. Maybe it's too expensive, maybe it just was a lot more to take on than someone wanted to. But again, it's not uncommon to see that happen. So save yourself some money and some headache and know what you're getting into ahead of time. And I did pull some numbers here, so we're going to go over, kind of pricing on land. But before we do, I kind of want to explain something to you, and that is, that you have to understand Eastern Tennessee has a lot of different terrain, it has a lot of different features, and there's a big area here too, so your locations are all over the place. And those are all the things that are going to determine how much a piece of land is. So the other day, I had a client, we were looking at 90 acres in Kingston or something like that, somewhere over there. When we, pulled comps, we had, properties that were 400,000 and we had properties that were 800,000. That's a $400,000 swing there. And you'll see that that's pretty much across the board when it comes to land, because so many things factor into that. One, how usable is the land? And this is really important for you too if you're looking to do a homestead or a family compound, because you need several building sites. You need places for your chicken coops or places for your homes. Mountain land is going to be a lot cheaper. I can't tell you how many times people have sent me a piece of land and said, "Oh, I found a great deal. Look at this. It's 10 acres for $50,000." I'm like, listen, there's no great deals in real estate right now, at least not in our area. Hate to tell you, but that's just how it is. Sure enough, we'll pull it up, we'll look at terrain, and it'll be, the side of a mountain. And it's like, well, that's why it's $50,000 because you can't do anything with it. So, so terrain is going to factor into pricing. Features, does it have a pond? Does it have a river or a creek? That can add to it. Obviously, if it's near the lake. Something else that can really, change that is location. If you're within 20 minutes of, a nice town, then it's probably going to be expensive. So when we start looking at location, that's a big one there. That is definitely a big one. I would say the further out you go, the better the pricing is going to be. I think that's pretty obvious, but I got to say it anyways. So know what you're getting into as far as the land goes, and as far as how much that land's going to cost you. That's the first thing. So I have pulled some numbers here that we can go over just to kind of see sort of what land is kind of, in general selling for in this area. So I pulled two sets of numbers. My first one is between 5 and 10 acres. This was out of 211 listings that sold in the last year. The median sold price was $160,000. Now, here's the crazy thing though, is that the swing, the high was 1.6 million and the low was 30,000. I mean, you talk about a swing. Golly, that's a huge gap between those two. So we'll do the best we can to average those out. We'll say they're 7.5 acres, and that puts our average price per acre about $21,333. I don't know how good that number is going to do you, to be honest with you, because again, you see how wide that swing is. But we'll do the best we can for you analytical people, and I get it. I'm analytical myself. The next set of numbers I did was between 10 and 20 acres. Out of 101 listings, the median sold price was $189,000. The high was 2.1 million and the low was 45,000. Again, if we do the best to average that out, we're looking at about 12,660 per acre. So I could keep doing this. I could go up to 50 acres. I could go up to 100 acres, but you're going to see the same thing, and that is just a huge swing. So I say all that to say, when it comes to pricing land, if you're really worried about overpaying for a piece of land, the best thing you can do is pay a professional to go out and appraise it. So we can add an appraisal contingency to your offer, you can pay, that appraisal fee, whatever it may be. And we can make sure to get that, we can make sure that you're not overpaying for that land. The next part of this, figuring out what you're getting into is going to be talking with a builder, right? So what you're going to be looking for here is going to be more of like a custom home builder, and you're going to find people in our area all over the spectrum, from very high end custom homes to just regular builders grade houses. Now, it's going to be really important for you to talk to these builders, prior to, again, even starting this whole process, because you need to know like what's the price per square foot going. And then you also need to dig in really deep and say, hey, well, does that cover a septic tank if we need it? Does that cover a well if we need it? How long of a driveway does that cover? Because some of these properties, especially if you want your home to sit back, you're looking at a longer driveway. So really think about like what you want to do with that property, what you need the builder to do, and then sort of, ask those questions so that you can figure it out, so that when we're out there looking at land, you've already got an idea of like, well, the builder said that, he would do 30 feet concrete, or the builder said, whatever he said, we can kind of, look at the property and make sure that it's going to work for that. The next thing that you need to talk with your builder about as well is going to be the process. Okay. What are the selections like? This is a huge problem for a lot of people, and I don't think that you really think about it until you really start to dive in. I think more people than not kind of go by the motto of buy once, cry once, right? Because we've all, bought cheaper stuff and then, 2 months later had to upgrade to what we should have bought the first time. We've all, bought a car, or heck, I bought a boat. I bought the cheapest boat of that type of boat I could get, and I've kicked myself ever since. And I wish I would have spent $5,000 more and got a little bit nicer of a boat. But here we are. I say all that to say, when you're dealing with a house, you can really run into a little bit of issues with that, because you think about, if you use that, kind of motto towards everything, you can really jack that price up, because you're talking about flooring, cabinets, countertops, fixtures, appliances, and the list goes on and on and on, So you need to talk to your builder about that. And also you need to sit down and make yourself some hard set rules when it comes to building. Okay. Along with that, you also need to figure out like build times and start times and things like that, to make sure that that's all going to line up with what you need. One last thing is, you also need to talk with your builder about what inspections that he would want during your due diligence period. Some builders may want specific things, and some may not. Some may just say, hey, just buy the land and we'll figure it out. But definitely ask that, because that's a really good question for your builders. When it comes to recommending builders, I definitely have some that I can recommend in some of the communities, and in like lake builders, stuff like that. Even some builders up in Gatlinburg that do like the cabins and stuff. But there's so many builders down here. The best thing that you can really do is get on one of these social media pages, and just about every town will have one. And you could even go to like the Knoxville Facebook page, and I would ask, like for a list of recommendations for builders, and just hear what other people's experiences are. I don't have a big enough body of work with these builders to feel comfortable recommending someone to you, and I never want to BS you guys. So that would be my recommendation as far as like going with a builder. Now, moving on, the next thing that I want to talk about is we're going to kind of just talk about like tips from here on out, just some things that I've picked up with along the way. And the first set of tips I'm going to talk about is just getting yourself some good tools to help with this process, right? So at this point, we kind of know what to expect as far as pricing goes. Now what we want to do is we want to set ourselves up so that we can kind of vet these properties and make sure that they're going to be a good fit for you. The first tip that I'm going to recommend is going to be a real estate agent. And I know you guys are probably saying, oh, well, you're just saying that because you're a realtor. I'm not. I'm saying that because there's a lot of information that you need to dig up on these properties that a realtor can help with. The first one being restrictions. Here in Eastern Tennessee, just because a property doesn't have an HOA doesn't mean that it doesn't have restrictions. And I say that because a lot of people say, hey, we want land. We definitely don't want an HOA because we don't want restrictions. And I have to say, well, that's not really how it works here. how it works here is a lot of times your restrictions are tied in through the subdivision. So it'll be subdivisional restrictions. So with that being said, we need to make sure that if you want to raise chickens, that there's nothing in the restrictions that would prohibit that, right? So you got that. You've also got surveys and things like that. We can help dig all that stuff up. You also are going to have, a few other things too that pop up that a good realtor can help you with. Okay, and one of those, which is a pretty important one, is going to be helping you figure out, is it in a flood zone? Or something crazy like that. We can go in our FEMA map. And I will say, be careful when you guys are looking at like realtor.com or Zillow. They have their little flood map, and it's always wrong. It always is. Reach out to someone to actually look at the real like FEMA map to tell you if it's actually in a flood zone. I couldn't tell you how many times that thing has just been it's just wonky. I wouldn't pay any attention at all to it. So that's one. Two, obviously getting you access to the land so that we can walk around and view it. And then three, also helping you figure out like what location is going to be best for you. If you need to be within, 20 minutes of a good hospital or at least a hospital, then you need to have someone that knows the areas that can say, oh, well, here's a hospital here. Now, obviously you can do all this yourself, but I'm telling you, I do think that, it's kind of like, whenever you're building something, having the right tool for the job makes it so much easier. Having a realtor is going to make it so much easier from that perspective. The second tool, and this is one of my favorite tools that I use for real estate, and that is it's actually a hunting app. And I got it for hunting and then started using it more and more for real estate. And now I just about use it more for real estate than I do hunting. And that is OnX Hunt. Okay, this does cost money. It's going to cost you, I believe it's $30 a year. But if you're serious about buying land, this is going to be such an outstanding tool for you because one, it's going to show you property lines. It has a topo feature, so you can switch it over and you can see the topography of the land. You can see like just a normal Google view of the property. So, you can look and see what the neighbors look like. You can zoom out. You can see all kinds of stuff. It'll allow you to drop pins. So like, let's say that you're looking at a piece of property, you're e-scouting it, from your computer. You could drop pins and little markers for yourself so that when we're at the land, maybe you wanted to go check that out and see like, how steep is that? Maybe you see some stacked up contour lines, or maybe you see like a little blue line and you want to see how big that creek is. Stuff like that is really helpful. And I'll tell you another thing that is incredibly helpful with the app is that you can actually download sections of the state. And at this point, I've got darn near the whole eastern side downloaded, but you can download different parts of the state. And that way, if you don't have cell service while you're there, it will still work and it will even still show where you are on that map. So we can walk around the perimeter because it'll show the lot lines, or at least close enough. We can walk around, kind of see, how that property is shaped, where we are on the property. And I'm telling you, it's just such a really, really good tool. Again, you can figure out, building sites, where your high and low spots are, just all kinds of good stuff. The next tool I'm going to say is Google, and you can use all kinds of different things in Google. Obviously, the satellite view is wonderful for figuring out like, hey, is there some crazy commercial buildings around you? What do the neighbors look like? This and that. Google's also great for the street view, and I really recommend using that street view because you can literally walk up and down the street and just see what the neighborhood's like. If that's something that's important to you, that is a really good tool. And then also just using Google to map, like how far is it from the school? How far is it from a Walmart? How far is it, from whatever that's important to you? So I would definitely use that during the vetting process as well. Now, other than that, another tip that I want to throw at you, and this is going to be when it comes to touring properties. Oftentimes I show up to properties and we're about to go, look through, 20, 30, 40 acres, whatever it may be. And people show up in sandals and shorts, and that might be comfortable in the summer heat, but it's not going to be comfortable when you've got ticks and chiggers on you. And that is definitely something to be concerned about here. So I would highly recommend boots and pants if you're going to be out looking at a lot of land. I mean, I've gotten tigers, I've gotten chiggers, I've gotten ticks, I've gotten all kinds of, bugs and stuff like that from showing land. So I've learned my lesson. If I'm showing land, I have pants and boots. And I even go a step further. I use this stuff for hunting season. It's called Sawyer's. It's a permethrin spray. You can spray your clothes down, it dries, it doesn't have a scent or anything like that, it doesn't mess your clothes up, and that is a wonderful tick and chigger repellent. So if you're going to be looking at a lot of land, it might not be a bad idea. You can usually just go to like a Walmart or something and get that stuff, but it really is wonderful. I use it all the time. I've never gotten a tick on me with that stuff, and it lasts for like 5 or 6 washes or something like that. So that's a pro tip for you right there. Another pro tip is don't go walking on someone's land if you don't have permission, okay? We have a lot of guns in Tennessee, and you don't want to find out who has them. Let's see. So the next part, this is going to be kind of the last part too, and that's just going to be your due diligence period. I touched on this earlier when it comes to dealing with your builder. Definitely ask them if there's any thing that they want to ask for. But there's a lot of different inspections you can have with land. Perk tests. You can have someone do their well test, stuff like that. You need to figure out like kind of what's going to be important to you prior to making an offer. I can't tell you that you need to do this and this, because if I miss something and you took my advice, obviously people love to sue realtors, so I can't tell you what all inspections to have. So you need to make sure to figure out which ones that you want. And again, your builder could be a really good resource whenever it came to that. So that's pretty much it with the due diligence. Land, honestly, is typically pretty easy peasy. It just comes down to negotiating the right price and finding the right piece of land. That's often a big concern as well. So as far as land goes, I mean that's pretty much as I can think of to put on this video. So I'm sure I've missed several things. And, if I have, comment, or better yet, just give me a call. I link my phone number in every single one of these videos, and people will call it and they're always surprised that it's me, but I'm telling you, it's me. So call the number if if you need help. You have any questions about buying land or buying an existing home as well. I will say oftentimes we'll start looking at land and people will kind of shift gears and sort of end up, buying something that's already ready to go. That happens. I would say that happens more often than people actually buying the land and going through with it. I think there's a lot less unknowns that way. You kind of know exactly what the price is going to be because it's whatever you offer, and you kind of you have your inspections, everything like that. So that happens a lot. So if that's the situation you're in as well, I could certainly help you buy a regular home as well. It doesn't have to just be land. But anyways, I've been talking forever. I'm gonna get off here. Thank you guys so much for watching. I'll catch y'all on the next one.